أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل العفو كذلك يبين الله لكم الآيات لعلكم تتفكرون في الدنيا والآخرة ويسألونك عن اليتامى قل إصلاح لهم خير. تتوني في الدنيا والآخرة ويسألونك عن اليتامى قل إصلاح لهم خير وإن تخالطوهن فإخوانكم والله يعلم المفسد من المصلح ولو شاء الله لأعنتكم إن الله عزيز حكيم. ولا تنكحوا المشركات حتى يؤمن ولأمة مؤمنة خير من مشركة ولو أعجبتكم لا تنكحوا المشركين حتى يؤمنوا ولعبد مؤمن خير من مشرك ولو أعجبكم أولئك يدعون إلى النار والله يدعو إلى الجنة والمغفرة بإذنه ويبين آياته للناس لعلهم يتذكرون. ويسألونك عن المحيض قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض ولا تقربوهن حتى يطهرن فإذا تطهرن فأتوهن من حيث أمركم الله إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المتطهرين. نساؤكم حرث لكم فأتوا حرثكم أنى شئتم وقدموا لأنفسكم واتقوا الله واعلموا أنكم ملاقوه وبشر المؤمنين ولا تجعلوا الله عرضة لأيمانكم أن تبروا وتتقوا وتصلحوا بين الناس والله سميع عليم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Last week, the question was asked by the Sahaba. يسألونك عن الخمر والميسر. They ask you about alcohol, intoxicants, and gambling. Tell them there is some benefit. قل فيهما إثم كبير. There is big sin in them, but there's also some benefit for the people. However, their vices are much greater than their benefits. Then the question goes, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. What should they spend on? قُلِ الْعَفُوَ. And afu is anything good. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ. Allah, like this, makes His verses clear to you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Perchance you may think and reflect. In today's page, the continuation of this is في الدنيا والآخرة, in this world and the next. The question then begins, يسألونك عن اليتامى. They ask you about the orphans. You know, many times in that context, in many parts of the Muslim world today, we have, you know, brothers dying, and then you have to take in the nephew, and so he's an orphan, or families taking in children and they become orphans. So the issue was, Allah was very strict in stating the guidelines that you can't mix, meaning they have their own wealth. You can't just consume freely. Some people abuse orphans. Most orphans grow up very poorly, you know, second to the original children of the person. And so they take the benefits, which is the inheritance of that orphan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was setting guidelines. قُلْ إِصْلَاحٌ لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ. If you do good for them, islah, to benefit them and to, you know, bring about good for them, that is good for you. وَإِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ. The Sahaba took this so serious that they would cook separate food just so they don't take a bite of something that belonged to the orphan. So then it became very hard on them. You know, they would cook two meals, they would have two, almost like two separate kitchens, because they don't want to mix the money. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, it's okay to have some integration here, you know, let them eat with you, don't take it to that level. Allah then says, Allah knows the mufsid, the corrupt one, from the muslih, from the righteous one. Allah knows your intention. Allah knows who's the ones who are taking the money to abuse it versus the ones who are just, you know, trying to do good by the orphan. So don't take it that serious. If you mix with them, then they're your brothers. إِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ. Meaning treat them like your own family and be with them. At the same time, keep in mind that they have a separate, you know, inheritance or money that they were left behind. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَأَعْنَتَكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Allah could have made it hard for them. He could have stipulated, you know, everything has to be separate. Don't touch a penny of their inheritance. But Allah didn't do that. وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ. This next topic is very serious because it's actually a societal issue that we're suffering. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't marry the mushrikat. The mushrikat are the women who are idolaters, pagans. And so he says, until they believe. He didn't say don't marry them, period. He said, don't marry them until they believe. And he says, وَلَا أَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ. and that a female slave is better for you. خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكَةٍ. She's better than a polytheist female. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ. Even if the polytheist woman looks better to you or is more appealing for you. وَلَا تُنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And don't, and this is addressed to the women. However, it is addressing the wellies of the women. The Mushrikat is polytheists, so it doesn't include the people of the book, which are Christian Jews. But we're going to get to that. It's a very touchy topic. Then Allah says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا. And Allah is saying to the men or the fathers of the daughters, don't marry your women to the mushrikeen. Right? And very interesting, Allah is not directly addressing the women here, because the way it's supposed to be done is the father is supposed to marry off the daughter. So Allah is talking to the fathers, the Muslim fathers. Don't marry your daughters off to those who believe in many gods, pagans. حتى يؤمنوا, until they believe. ولا عبد مؤمن, and a male slave who's a believer, خير من مشرك, is better than a mushrik, one who associates partners with Allah. ولو أعجبكم, even if he impresses you. Sometimes a guy comes to your daughter, he's a doctor, he's got a lot of money, he's well established, and you're very tempted, but he may be Hindu, or he may be someone who's atheist, or the likes. And so you're faced with a real test here, and then on top of that, if your daughter pressures you, now you're caught in a very bad position. أولئك يدعون إلى النار. Allah clearly says they are the ones who call to the fire. والله يدعو إلى الجنة, and Allah calls you to Jannah and maghfirah and forgiveness بإذنه, with his permission. ويبين آياته, and he makes his verses clear to the people. للناس لعلهم يتذكرون, perchance they may take heed and remember. Now the issue here is some of our mashayikh have made fatwas here in America and in the West after seeing a destructive road of Muslim men marrying even Christian and Jewish women, and vice versa. The Muslim woman marrying the even the Christian man and the Jewish man. The issue is that most of the time it ends up in some sort of divorce, and the children end up not being Muslim, and that's a huge loss for you. And then the pressures that they face is so enormous. You're trying to tell them, hey, listen, I need my daughter to wear hijab, but they don't get it. They're not from the same background that you're from, and so it becomes really difficult. And then the prerequisite, by the way, of you marrying a Christian or a Jewish woman is that she's a chaste woman. She's someone with good character. You can't marry just any Jewish Christian. So she has to be of good character. She has to be a virtuous woman, even in her religion, meaning she follows some tenets of her faith. Because nowadays, they may label themselves as Christians, but there's nothing Christian about them, right? And same thing with Muslims. There's some Muslims, they say by name, but there's nothing Muslim about them. They don't pray, they don't do anything. And so now it becomes, is it just by the name? Just, oh, I'm Muslim and that's it? No, there has to be a degree of faith within whatever it is that they believe. And then the other point is that between the when there has to be the father and the daughter, there has to be a conversation between the two, meaning the dad has the final approval. He does take the daughter's opinion very seriously. I mean, she has the right to refuse someone, but at the same time, as her wali, as the one who is marrying her off, because what it is a transfer of responsibility from the father to the husband. So he has some say in this. And if you look at the only time we have the marriage contract in the Quran is Musa alayhi salam and Shu'aib. That's the only time we see how a marriage is supposed to play out in the whole Quran. What happens is one of the daughters of Shu'aib, she sees Musa alayhi salam, and she tells her father, "Father, you should hire him. He is a strong man. He's trustworthy." So she brings him up to the father. And so the father takes a look at him, has a conversation with him. So now Allah is telling us this is the framework. The man is talking with the man. Why? Because women are very emotional. If you let the mother go and do the conversation, what happens? She doesn't want to let her son go. She's gonna make any excuses. She go to the house. Oh no, the tea is not right, or the drapes are not the way they're supposed to be, and then she'll she'll call up the whole thing. And the son goes, Mom, I brought you up like 30 girls, all of them you shut down. That's why Allah is saying it should be between Musa alayhi salam and Shu'aib. They're sitting down together. Shu'aib tells him, I'll offer you my daughter and you do this in return. The mahar is discussed, all of the discussed between man and man, and then finally it's done. But he did take his daughter's opinion. Some fathers, unfortunately, in our societies, they say, you have to marry your cousin or you have to marry him. And it becomes where she doesn't like that person. And that's haram in our religions. It's disliked. It's not something that's encouraged because the Prophet ﷺ always gave the daughter, he would give the choices, the women of Medina. And so this is an early Medini verse that came down. So a lot of the mushrikun still had, a lot of the Muslim men, I'm sorry, had mushrikun wives. So this was something from now on for them, because those who already were involved, it's not something they could just drop and divorce. But this was setting the rules. And, Allah is saying, even if it's a slave, and Allah is saying, khayrun, it's better for you. Sometimes love is blinding. A friend may say, hey, listen, I don't think she's good for you, but you're already involved, so you don't want to listen to that friend. But what if Allah is telling you, Allah is saying, no, this is not good for you? Then you must, wake up out of that blindness and start considering the repercussions. And sometimes you just ask friends, look at other people who went through this situation. Very seldom do they come out safe and secure. Usually life is ruined, the kids are gone. And so this is something to think about, And if not the kids are gone, then that person who married into the mushrikun or vice versa, the female or the male, what ends up happening to his faith, he starts to lose his own faith. Meaning he's like, some people even like start going to like, the Hindu temples or something like that. And they just, I know families like that, mostly Guyanese families, because Guyanese families are caught in a bind. They're usually marrying, the Muslim women are marrying Hindu men. And all of a sudden, boom, the Hindu men take them, and the kids are gone. The kids don't know, hey, yeah, my father's Muslim. And there's a bit of a problem there. But Allah is setting the rules for us to take heed. Then the Muslim, the Sahaba, they ask another question. They ask, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They ask you about the menstruation for the woman. Because before this, the only time you couldn't be intimate with your wife is, we know, during Ramadan and during the Hajj period where you're making pilgrimage. Those periods where you're at ihram or you're fasting, you couldn't be intimate with your wife. So they asked, well, what about when she's in her menstruation? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ هُوَ أَذَى. It is a time of harm for them. It's pain, time of pain. فَاعْتَزِلُوا. So stay away from them. فِي الْمَحِيدِ, at the time where they're going through this menstruation. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ, and don't come near them حَتَّى يَطَّهُرْنَ, until they are pure. Now, our Jewish brothers, they completely stay away from them. I mean, they sleep in separate beds. It's a very complete segregation. But in Islam, the Prophet ﷺ said, no, you could be intimate in the sense of hugging and kissing, but you just don't take it to the sexual intercourse portion of it during this time. And there's many harms that come out of doing that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is setting the guidelines, says you could, show them love and kindness during this time, but don't take it to the sexual intercourse. ولا تقربوهن حتى يطهرن, and don't do that until they're pure. فإذا تطهرن فأتوهن من حيث أمركم الله. Once the period is over, then you can go ahead and approach them in the way that Allah commanded you to. إن الله يحب التوابين. Allah loves those who are seeking a purification. ويحب المتطهرين, and He loves those who are pure. The tawabin are those who constantly seek spiritual purification. They're always making tawbah. They're always seeking to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then He also says mutatahirin, physical, those who seek physical purification. They're always clean. And clean is what? Is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says is clean. So when we make wudu, that's part of tahara. When we take ghusl after we have sexual intercourse, part of tahara. When we shave our pubic hairs and our armpits, these are tahara rules that Allah set for us. So Islam has their own tahara. We wash our hands, we wash our feet when we make wudu. Different societies don't have that. right? So we have our own tahara. Allah loves those who are pure, constantly pure, all the time, seeking purification. Then Allah says, "Nisa'ukum, your women, harthun lakum, are like a harvest for you. Fa'tu harthakum anna shi'tum." So approach your garden or your harvest in whichever way you like, giving the imagery that you plant the seed and then they bore your children and so forth. وَقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ, and prepare for yourselves. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and it could be said that وَقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ, try to plant seeds that the Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged to have many children, so the Ummah of Muhammad could be vast in number. Um, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, and have fear of Allah, be conscious of Allah. وَعَلَمُوا, and know أَنَّكُمْ مُلَاقُوهُ, that you will one day meet Him. See, Allah is setting these rules for us, with the orphans, with the alcohol, with the gambling, the menstruation, who to marry, who you can't marry. And then Allah says, be mindful of Allah and know that you're going to return one day to Him. It's not these rules you just play around with. You just don't read it and ignore it. Allah is setting these guidelines, and fear Him and be mindful of Him. And one day you will meet Him. وَبَشِّرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and give good news and glad tidings to the believers. Then Allah says, وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ عُرْضَةً لِأَيْمَانِكُمْ, and don't let Allah prevent you from fulfilling your oath. أَن تَبَرَّؤُوا وَتَتَّقُوا, that you do good and you taqwa, وَتُصْلِحُوا, and you reform بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, between the people. وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. This here is talking about, we'll talk about it inshallah more detail next week. But this is some people used to swear that they won't do certain things, but those things were actually good things, things that would bring reformation to society. But because of what they call nadhr, an oath that they made, so Allah is saying, don't use my name to prevent you from actually doing good things. So if there's a situation where you can do good things, but you said you swore off something, don't worry about that. Because what's important is that you bring about the good that you want to do. And so next week we're going to talk about some people swearing, but all swearing is not the same. Some people use it as a cultural thing. Wallahi, wallahi, wallahi. So Allah knows the difference between a real swearing and one that's used casually in language. But Allah is also encouraging not to use His name like that all the time. Like you swear by something, it's a serious thing. So we're going to talk about that in detail, inshallah, next week as it continues on to the next page. Um, any questions or comments you might have? Maybe some people went through some things they'd like to share in regards to this topic. Please feel free to do so, inshallah. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. We'll make dua for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord of the worlds, Lord of the great throne, to bring a speedy victory to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove for them the hardship and the test and the fitna. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them a decisive victory over their enemies. We ask you, Allah, to heal their sick and to have mercy upon their dead. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to bring the children that have died into Jannat al-Firdaus, Ibrahim alayhi salam. We ask you, Allah, to bring peace and tranquility to the area. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to free Masjid al-Aqsa from the occupation. We ask you, Allah, to free Masjid al-Aqsa from the occupation. We ask you, Allah, to return people their homes and their families. We ask you, Allah, to bring peace and tranquility to the area for the Muslims. We ask you, Allah, to give us victory over disbelieving people. It is only you who can give the victory. We ask you, Allah, we have no one else but you, O Allah, to ask. We ask you, Allah, we know through your power and might that you can do anything if you just say kun fayakun. We ask you, Allah, please bring a decisive victory and a swift victory for the people of Gaza and all the Muslims all over the world who are suffering from occupation and oppression. Ameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala ahlihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.